Welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us for the Michigan Online Visionary Educators event. The Michigan Online Visionary Educators, or MOVE series, is hosted by the Center for Academic Innovation at the University. An important part of our mission is to create a more inclusive and global learning community. We believe an informed, peaceful, and equitable society is dependent on learners everywhere, adopting a learning lifestyle. This monthly series will feature experts sharing insights, tools, and discussions on issues relevant to the lives of people around the world. Many of the speakers may be familiar to you as the faculty behind some of our most successful and innovative learning experiences available through Michigan Online. For information on our upcoming MOVE series events, be sure to check out the schedule at online.umich.edu/move. Just a couple housekeeping items. We invite you to submit any questions for me and for Michael in the Q&A section of the event, and we'll do our best to help answer those in our time. Today's event will be recorded. The recording will be made available at Michigan Online at online.umich.edu/move. And today I'm excited to be joined by Professor Michael Niebling, an assistant professor of information in the U of M School of Information, an assistant professor of electrical engineering and computer science in the College of Engineering. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Jeremy, how's it going? Good to see you.
It's good. It's good. Good to see you.
All right.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's, for some of the attendees or viewers that may not be familiar with extended reality or XR, do you want to give us a quick overview of that tech and maybe where this is all going?
Yeah, right. Okay, cool. Yeah. So as some of the attendees may know, I teach AR, VR courses, or we brand them as XR now. So I think all of these are acronyms or refer to a set of technologies that allow us to blend the virtual content with the real world. So imagine, like, if I were to give a weather report, like behind me, you would see really how the sun is shining. Like, I'm just making things up here over the next few weeks, and it'll always be sunny. And so this content would be like appearing behind me, and but in a way so that it feels like it's actually situated with me. So that would be a form of augmented reality. And so the other thing to think about, and I think a lot of people are very excited about virtual reality at the moment. So usually wearing a helmet and not seeing the real world anymore, and being exposed to virtual content, and then that somehow has to interact with the real world. So it's definitely an interesting space. So I always say to my students, virtual reality replaces reality, and augmented reality, I mean, normally enhances reality by adding virtual content into the space, but it can also be used manipulatively, and it can actually mediate the reality that you see. And I think when you think about those things, we'll start discussing a lot more of the issues that we will be facing in the future.
Oh, that's great. It's a good way to describe it, a good overview. I try to have a device with me sometimes to show folks if they've never tried it or see it.
Well, I have an augmented reality device here. Usually
there you go.
Like glasses that you put on, and so like it's not on at the moment, but like now I would see beautiful Michael, and now it's real Michael.
Yes, very enhanced. Well, I mean, mostly today we want to talk about the XR for everybody, the course you created, and just really the idea behind that, because we really think it will affect everybody. Anybody could participate in creating this future in this world. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the course and how it's gone so far, and then maybe we'll talk about going forward?
Right. Yeah. So the course is so it's a set of courses. So they go under extended reality for everybody. So it's 3 courses. The first is an introduction. There's a lot of technical concepts we need to establish first, and an overview of the technologies. A lot of it is oftentimes people are not aware of what we can do already. We think we see things in the movies, and we think this is the future, when in fact many of these things are already possible. And sometimes we just don't know yet, like, how it's being used or what would be good ethical use cases. So we'll also think about the issues in the first course. The second and third course go deeper into design and development. All the courses are designed for beginners. They don't go too deep. So they like you will not be you can probably not be an engineer working for a major XR company at the end of the course. I think I never suggested that, but you will have a very good overview of all the design tools that are available at this stage and also development tools. So those are the 3 courses. And yeah, the mission was to give everybody the tools to understand what these technologies are, what they are capable of, think through some of the issues. So privacy, security, social concerns, ethical, what's the responsibility of the designer? I mean, you create a virtual environment around the user. And if any of you have watched some movies in the past where these technologies were misused, I think there are actually many realistic, unfortunate use cases of these technologies as well.
Yeah, and I think we'll take questions as we go live. There's a question related to that. You might have addressed it, but what educational background do you need to take the specialization? I think
right.
There's no.
So to be clear, the specialization again consists of 3 courses, and they are like maybe in a little bit of increasing technical background. So the first course is really designed for everybody. So it gives no educational background is assumed. So basically it'll introduce you to how these computers work. They are sitting on your head, or you hold them in your hands, and then what can you do with them, and what are the technical terms, and then also what are some of the issues. The design oriented course, the one in the middle, the user experience design course, I mean, I try to include as much as is necessary from there are obviously courses focused on interaction design and user experience design. So my course is focused on AR VR for user experience. And so what happened, actually, some of the learners wrote back, they find these courses very valuable. And sometimes it actually, they were like, oh, I didn't even know user experience design exists. And so they continued studying like more of the foundations, which I don't assume, but I didn't cover like in all the depth. So the last course is a development course where I think that's one of the courses where I'm honestly thinking maybe I need to put in a little more work. My idea for that course was to provide an overview of what are the development tools, like, you know, Michael being the professor, I'll tell you the method and I give you the process, and then you'll figure it out. The you'll figure it out part, I think it could use a little bit more hand holding. So the people come into this course, into the last one, and assume that I give tutorials in Unity, which is like one of the main tools. It's not the only thing to do AR VR, and so there might be some disappointment if that's what you expected. And in fact, there are actually very good courses focused on just some of the tools in the space that I would recommend instead. But I think my courses are designed to give you an overview, and like if you are like an enthusiast, or if you're like the XR guy in wherever you work or wherever you study, then I would hope that you have all this foundational knowledge. So I think the courses are really designed to give you that knowledge.
Yeah, I really think I send a lot of folks to the intro course to really get that foundational knowledge, and like, how do these headsets actually project these holograms? How does it work with your eye and your brain? And I think it's a really good baseline for folks that want to understand how this works and take it to the next level. I want to come back to the user experience space you talked about. I think it's interesting because some of our team really thinks about this a lot and tries to understand how do you develop in 3D space, and how, what are some best practices, and where do we take this, because so much development, at least computer development, has been done for a screen or for a touch screen or a browser over the last 40, 50. Yeah. And so how do you think about that, or what do you try to help the students understand designing for 3D space?
Yeah, I think actually it is interesting. So in the most technical version of the courses I teach here at Michigan, the figuring out the tools and what you can do in AR VR, that's something most people will figure out, but the hardest jump is actually from 2D to 3D. So we are used to thinking of 2D screen coordinates, and like, okay, if I move a little bit 40 pixels to the right and 40 pixels down, I know what that means. But in 3D, I also have to consider the depth. And actually the depth really determines how big this thing really appears. So it gives you a new sense of how scale and dimensions really work. So if you're used to 2D design, Thinking in terms of 3D, I mean, thinking in terms of 3D is straightforward, but designing in 3D and developing, and also how interactions work, suddenly there's not a mouse cursor anymore. You have to shoot a laser into the scene. So we talk about ray casting. And so a lot of these concepts are actually very well explained. I think one of the metaphors I often use is filmmaking. If you think about filmmaking and all the things that go into filmmaking, like obviously you have a director, then you have like a cinematographer, but that is a person that the director controls. So if you are the director of the XR experience, the user is actually the person holding the camera, and you need to give them the right cues to actually make them see and find the things you want them to see and interact with. And so I think these are some of the challenges. And then obviously special effects are like the things that really need to be designed carefully. So I like the filmmaking metaphor, and also gives a sense of like, there's a lot of hobbyists, like everybody can have a camera these days and upload to social platforms, but and actually a lot of AR VR content is like that. It feels like this Wild West, or in the early stages of the web, and everybody was doing a little web page, and I'm the web designer now. It feels like this. To create a professional, really well-designed XR experience, I think requires a lot more training and actually learning by doing. So the other problem in the space is there's not a set of like, okay, here's a book, read it, and then you know what to do. We actually figure many of these things still out. We don't know often what's a good design and is it effective. And so it's very exciting to me as a space. It's not straightforward to teach. And so, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people thinking about design, and us specifically here at Michigan and your team thinking about designing for education, like enriching educational experiences with AR, VR, which I think there's really great potential. But even there, many things could go wrong. Like we could accidentally exclude large student populations.
We have to make sure it's accessible.
Or triggering things. And so, yeah, it's not an easy space. It's cool, but it's challenging. But I like challenges, and you do too, I know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, here's a question that just came in from AOA. What are the important facts you see from a potential graduate student who can be successful in this field?
Actually, I think that's cool. So the first thing I would say is don't just think it's these computer scientists or people who really know the tech. Those are not the only people that we need in this space. In fact, we have too many of them. We need people that think about user experience design. We really need to, like, development is something, it's like math. You can learn and you can do, there are established rules. But design is actually something that only a few people who have a talent can actually really creative. It's hard to learn. I mean, you can get better by doing things, but it's like hard to learn. So I would wish that, so some of the best profiles that I work with, let's say, are students with an architectural background. They really understand like 3D design, 3D perception, actually can create content, know most of the tools, know many more tools than I do, really good. Obviously, computer science backgrounds are very good because you can touch some of the technical issues, but you have a lot more tools these days. You don't actually have to deal with all these low-level things anymore. I mean, oftentimes you want to recognize something or track something that maybe is currently not possible with the toolkit. So then you would need a more specific technical background. But I think if I had to make a call to action and where we need more people in this space, I think it's really about human-computer interaction, user experience design, interaction design, creating pleasant, enjoyable experiences, also learning experience design, and like people thinking about how some of the things we know from previous education experiences, how they translate to AR, VR, what are the specific affordances of AR, VR that we could really leverage. So I think I would argue more around the soft skills. And then in each specific discipline, like if you are in maths or in biology or in physics or in medicine, I think those are like all these areas are perfect application domains where we just need more domain experts in those domains to really learn how to use AR, VR in their space. So this would be my answer. One of the long ones, as usual.
Yeah, I mean, our experience has been it's a really multidisciplinary field. We have project managers, we have designers, we have people that know how to tell a good story. I mean, still about the narrative and like how do you
Storytelling.
Or are you
Yeah.
going to traverse through this experience? Like, how is it going to keep you engaged? The learning experience design. What are the learning goals? Why VR? Is it cool? Is it fun? Is it actually going to help? So we think about those things quite a bit. Cool. Thanks for that question. Well,
Yeah.
so if you were to do this, teach a new course
Mhm.
or do a new lecture, what would it be on? I mean, lots changed in the last year.
Yeah, so I was actually thinking, so I still think it's relatively up to date. So I mean, some of the tools, unfortunately, so in some of the courses are built on technology and assume tools like Google Expeditions would still be around. It was a
Mm-hmm.
choice. It was very popular in the educational domain. So Google Tool Creator was a tool that would allow you to quickly design a 360 experience, and I recommended it to my students. And unfortunately, both these tools more or less have been, let's say, retracted by Google, discontinued.
Yeah.
And so that's sad. But if I had to teach a new course, I think right now a lot of people are very excited about, or actually have lots of questions about, what is this metaverse? We have two of the major companies a few weeks ago, or maybe just last week, Facebook, and now
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft getting into their pitches for the metaverse. And so I find it the metaverse. I actually don't know that it exists. And so I find it very interesting. As a first thing, I would probably establish how the metaverse is more like a multiverse
Yeah.
because you have
Yeah.
all these different providers and they all offer their online virtual spaces to you. And so actually it's like cloud storage. Like, is this
Yep.
stuff hosted on Google Drive or on Dropbox? Makes a big difference.
Sure.
Sometimes you can't find the stuff, you can't access the stuff. So I think I would do a course on the multiverse, what it is, so like future online shopping, learning, social interaction experiences.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more on collaboration. I think I would probably go a bit deeper on what collaboration means in mixed reality. And I feel like in the if I also my dream would be one day to teach a master class. So some
Mm.
of the feedback from the students is like, Michael, it's really helpful, good beginnings, but like I was really hoping you would teach me more about development and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a
Sure.
little sad because obviously I can teach all that stuff, like I can do all this stuff, but I
Sure.
decided to design it in a first iteration to reach a lot of people. And maybe it fell a
Right.
little short on the more technical side. So on the more advanced AR VR experiences, I could imagine like a master class or something like that. I
Mm-hmm.
would have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of fun teaching how to
Sure.
do research in this space. So I feel like, yeah, I have lots of ideas, but not enough time, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, and there's so many, I mean, depending on, you could go down a rabbit hole with AR and then mobile phone based AR or head mounted AR. You can go deep into the VR, and if you go down to Unreal versus Unity, there's a lot, very similar but different, options and affordances of what that can bring you. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you talked about the metaverse. It reminded me of, when the internet first started coming out of the scene, right? You had these providers like AOL and Prodigy and CompuServe, and like they were the gateway into the internet, right? They were
All
their
right.
kind of walled gardens, and it feels like it's a similar thing is happening, right? I think about the metaverse. I think it's like the spatial web. Like, how do you interact with the internet in 3D?
In 3D. Okay. Yeah.
Right. That's how I think about it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we'll be able to go to places that Microsoft creates or Facebook creates, or that, these other platforms, Meta, I guess, these other platforms that people have created, but it's just
Yeah.
a way to experience the content beyond the screen.
Well, I think a couple of things are very different to the original internet. The original internet was created with the intention of creating an open platform, a standard for
True.
communication, exchanging these documents. And in many ways, the web design today and the web design in the past, like in the past, it was really like, here's a document that has a few links to other documents, and then you can get information. And then some people thought, hey, let's just build complete user interfaces on top of this infrastructure. So it became a nightmare, responsive design, parallax scrolling, all these kinds of web design things. So, but fundamentally, we had agreed on that if you enter this network, you will be able to navigate it. We give you a few different browsers.
Sure.
Some of them have different options, but nobody actually really owns the space. The browser is like the door into that world that is created by lots of different people that have lots of knowledge. So with the AR VR space, it's actually very different. So if I create my metaverse and I give you the browser to my metaverse, and so I'm in control of both the door and the content that you see. Plus, it's not easy for you if your friend believes in the other metaverse. It's very difficult for you to have like actually shared experiences. So I think in theory, if we both agree we go to the same shoe store in virtual reality, and we can agree with whoever sells the shoes, then I think we can have a very cool experience together. And although I think shoe try on in AR or VR is one of the lowest hanging fruits and not the most promising applications, but a lot of people get very excited about online virtual shopping and like trying on clothes. I remember as a kid, like my mom gave me all these jackets to try on and I hated it. And so doing it in VR maybe is so much faster and more pleasant.
Sure.
It's not really an important problem. So, but the metaverse, yeah, it's interesting. So I think this will be a war over the next few years between the different vendors, just like we had a browser war for many decades actually, until, and it was interesting, companies like AOL or Time Warner or whatnot, we don't actually think about them anymore. So does that mean that in 20 years from now, there won't be Amazon, Microsoft, and Facebook anymore? Somebody else will
maybe.
have. Yeah, we don't know.
It's potential. It's potential for sure. Well, the questions getting upvoted here I want to raise before we kind of move on. So what tools do you recommend to make clickable UI prototypes for VR?
Yeah, I'll quickly go over some of the really detailed questions on the UX side. So first of all, you don't need to have a 360 camera in order to create AR prototypes. In my courses, I talk a lot about how you can do things just with paper prototyping, and I introduce you to templates. Some of these templates use 360 to design 360 around the user, but the intention is not that you have a 360 camera. Then there's a question on like, which tools do you actually use to make clickable UI prototypes for VR? And I really have this issue every time in my course. There's always like a new tool that wants to be like Tabori or like some others that want to be like the VR tool. In fact, some of our friends, they call themselves Metaverse, have a tool in the space. I think they were more focused on AR and maybe can do VR now. So the problem is, and then there are tools like InstaVR and some others. Anyway, so a lot of my friends have dedicated to some of these tools. But what I have decided to do in my class now is just like, you know what, just use Unity. And you use Unity as an editor. Like it's like forget about the scripting part and do that later. Simulate interactions by moving objects around, hiding them in the editor. Learn how to control the Unity editor. Design a virtual environment using the terrain component. And my students did it this semester. And in previous years, I was always reluctant. Like in Unity, when you open up the first time, it's like Photoshop. The first time, it's like, wow. So many options.
What are all these? Right. What are all these options?
It's like when you open up Word, you know how to type, but there's only a few really good secretaries in the world that really know how to use all the features of Word, like to send like mass messages customized to your users. But not a lot of people know that. So if you use Unity, you learn how to type in Unity, just like placing objects in there, imagining what it would be like in VR, then following a quick tutorial to allow you to preview it in VR, actually relatively straightforward these days. So the tool I would recommend is actually Unity. And then once you're in Unity, you can actually learn how to do some of the other things, like actually scripting if you're interested in that. And there's a lot of tools on top of Unity as well. So that's my answer. But I wouldn't have said that a year ago. There were actually other tools a year ago that I would recommend. Do you want to take one more? I feel like there was... You asked me about what did you ask me, Jeremy?
The clickable UI, you answered that. So not A-frame anymore for creating these quick prototypes?
Well, so
where are you sitting on that
that's
now?
interesting. I still think that if you have a web design background, I do a lot of prototyping with A-frame. I just like, it's so easy for me to come up with my own custom interactions and even doing hand tracking these days. And doing it in a browser and sharing it with my students. So I still am a big fan of the WebXR route that I teach in my courses. But I think the problem with A-frame was it was more promising when it was within Mozilla as an open standard, kind of like platform driven. Like I really had a lot of respect for Mozilla, but it moved out. and it became like an externally funded thing. They're doing great stuff, but I'm less certain about the future now that it's not in a good home anymore.
Gotcha.
So I would say Unity.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's the challenge with a lot of these applications or startups is they either get bought by a big company or
Yeah, I feel like
they
I've been
don't make
teaching
it, right?
for 4 or 5 years, and we always had a different tool lined up for VR. One time, the startup actually just died before before my
Oh
course.
no. Yikes.
Halo Labs, really nice people. They wanted to be bought, I guess, by InVision, but it didn't happen. And so yeah, we don't have a lot of click and play tools in the VR space. Learn the editor in Unity. Invest the time.
Yeah.
Is what I would say, and you will do a good thing actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say either one, Unity or Unreal.
Right.
They're both the editor, understanding how objects are placed in space, how you manipulate them. The tutorials both of those platforms are great to get you
You're actually
started.
absolutely right. So I meant Unity / Unreal, and I do think Unreal is actually often more appealing to non-technical, so non-programmers. They call things slightly differently. They're equally powerful. People say that Unreal renders better, and that's probably true if you don't use universal rendering pipeline. I don't know. Unity has also stepped up the game. So both of these
Yep.
are actually really good tools, and just knowing the editor without programming is really the thing to do. And so I think my view has changed a little bit in my course previously. I mean, I talked about all three. I covered Unreal not in as much depth, but I definitely want to include more Unreal in the future as well in my own teaching.
Cool. Yeah, they seem to have the most funding behind them to continue forward. One more question, then we'll jump forward. So, what text do you recommend to start VR process or start?
What? Sorry, what tech? Tech?
Yeah, texts, books, readings.
Oh.
Do you have?
Yeah, well, if there
articles,
was, so there's a lot of teachers that swear on the 3D user interfaces book by Laval and others. And so I think, not Laval, actually Lavoie, but anyway, so I can find that reference. I think I did not provide that reference. So 3D user interfaces. So the problem that I have with most books is they're actually really good books. And if you're teaching computer science, it's like the go-to book. Like every course that I know prior to mine would have just like built examples on top of the 3D UI book. So the 3D UI book is a go-to resource. It walks you over the interaction techniques. It gives you a little bit of the background on what are some of the promising application domains. But the problem that I saw with, like, I was missing resources in the, what if you really think more about the user and user experience design? And one of the reasons I created, like I would just say now, self-advertisement, but just look at the online courses and do the hands-on activities. You will learn a lot more than reading a book. It's like when a student tells me, oh, I learned JavaScript last night, I always imagine this thing like in the Matrix, they just consumed it and then they can fly the helicopter the next day. But it's not true. It doesn't work like that. So you can't just read, you have to do. And so I would encourage you to do some of the exercises in my courses, and they give you a good introduction.
Yeah. Start with the first course, really try to understand. If you don't know a lot about 3D space.
But if you want to then you jump directly into the second course. And if anything is missing in terms of foundational knowledge, you can you can load that through the matrix from the first course.
Well, we started to touch on the metaverse. I mean, what are your thoughts on what Facebook announced or Meta announced last week and what Microsoft announced 2 days ago?
So there are many thoughts. So one is obviously it is great that we have people who have resources to really commit to this future of what many call spatial computing, maybe the next paradigm of how we interact. So not these flat screens anymore, but you and I can experience this meeting. And with all our learners today, I mean, I'm not sure how cool it would be if you were all in the same virtual room together. Might be a little tight.
That'd be cool though.
It would be a different experience. Like we could shake hands, we could show, we could talk to each other and
see
so
each other.
Yeah, so could arm wrestle in AR. So anyway, so very exciting is the first thought. The other thought is It's not new. I mean, none of this is new. Like we have had many previous attempts. One is, for example, Second Life. Second Life was around 2006, I think, was like one of the hypes. We actually had a lot of physical spaces recreated in virtual reality. So I know, for example, a friend at Georgia Tech, Blair McIntyre, he had like his research lab was like both physical, but also like in Second Life, and they ran experiments and they connected with people. And a lot of people actually lived different identities in Second Life. And so in many ways, this will be recreated. And so, okay, we have updated technology. So I'm still excited, but it's not new. And what I don't like is like how it's hyped and marketed to me as something new, when in fact, we should really go back in history. Second Life failed. Like it was miserable. It actually died. There were a lot of things we didn't think through. And then maybe the third thought I have is like, so what does this really mean? And so I mean, it's cool if you do my online shopping. Okay, cool. But then if I have to work in that metaverse, like I already have trouble separating private and professional life right now. So how is it going to be when we work and live, at least partially, where everything is fully tracked? Like do I have control over my privacy? Who actually owns the data? What data is being generated? And so and then it's a good marketing thing for a lot of people, because we can learn more about people, we can tailor ads to them, we can show you the things you really want and you didn't need, but you find them, you see them right in front of you. So it's really tricky. And then my very last thought, okay, is like, it's a dream, because if you don't actually cooperate and work together and go to tear down the borders between vendors and actually create something like an internet, or we actually build it on top of the internet, which would be the best thing to do. We have various standards, OpenXR, WebXR. So why do we create I mean, I get it from a marketing perspective. You want all your Facebook people in that metaverse and all the Microsoft people in that metaverse, and Amazon is going to do their thing, and we have Tesla driving in the virtual metaverse,
scanning the world with every car.
They're scanning the world for everybody. We have the Niantic Pokemon Go people that scan areas that haven't been scanned recently, and so we have all the little virtual guys appear there. So we need to reconstruct Michael's room. So go to his place. I don't know. So yeah, it raises a lot of like, wow, are we really going to do this? Are we ready? And it comes back to the original. I think we weren't ready before. Many previous attempts have died. So maybe we are ready now. We'll see.
I mean, I think we're closer. I mean, the devices, I mean, back then, right, to experience Second Life in a headset, you needed a tens of thousands of dollar headset, right, tied to a very expensive
Well, I think
computer.
It was mostly on a computer screen and not so much really head-worn VR. But so honestly for you, you do a lot of your meetings in VR, I know, stand-ups. You and I have been to conferences in virtual reality. What do you think? Is the experience so much better compared to if it's remote and over a Zoom kind of screen, the way we have it now? What do you think?
I mean, my opinion's changed for the last 18 months, right? As we're all stuck at home or meeting remotely over Zoom. I mean, it definitely adds another dimension, pun intended. For this type of interaction. And we've tried a couple meetings, right, where your avatar was to the left of me and all of your audio was coming like you were to the side of me, right? So I felt the level of presence like you were there with me, where I don't have that same visceral feeling in this interaction, right? Like it's like we're talking on a phone or just a traditional way, but it really felt like we were in the same room. So that adds a dimension, but it's still, these devices are $300 to $5,000 a piece still. Like it's not as ubiquitous as a mobile phone, right? Like most people have a smartphone or have access to mobile phone technology. So I think we're a little early. I think there's a lot of potential. It also looks kind of ridiculous when I did a meeting yesterday in Spatial in this part on campus, and these people were walking by like, what is he doing in there? Like when you're outside watching somebody in VR, it looks a little silly, but
Well, that's what I mean by are we ready? I mean, you don't go to a coffee shop, sit down and spend 20 minutes in VR, like almost hitting all the coffee mugs around you.
No,
So,
that would be
but it will be,
ridiculous.
or in the
Yeah,
future, like how many people do it on the plane now? I haven't been flying recently. There have been studies in the past so that it would be socially acceptable on airplanes. And the result was like, no, but they also tried mostly 360. And like, I mean,
right.
if you do like, okay, I'm going to play golf here for a second. So you stand up with your VR
Right,
headset,
you're
like,
hitting the seat in front of you.
go. So I wonder, like, I mean, people will know, okay, he's doing VR. And then there are like people next around you, like, oh, I see these cameras. What does that mean? Am I live? Am I recorded? I just wanted to fly to San Francisco. So the social acceptance part is going to be, it's a generations thing
Right.
in some sense. But I do like that. I would like to keep up a critical perspective on that. Like, I mean, there will be people pushing the boundaries, and it's cool to be in a VR headset. On campus, it's fine, but in the pedestrian precinct, I'm not sure. Like, is that okay? Is that acceptable? Anyway, people wear cameras much more and use them all the time with their phones and all that. So in many ways, there has been societal progress that
Sure.
I think it is more likely now that the metaverse is something that might get accepted now more than in the past, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are places I see right now, like we're designing a new lab on campus, and we're prototyping it in VR, and we did a walkthrough last week. And
Yeah,
for me, as someone that doesn't, I can see a rendering and I can't really imagine it, like how I can see it, but I can't picture myself in there. Like, what does it mean when the desk is here and the table's there? But we actually brought it in to an application called Spatial, and like we walked through it, and I had like, oh, that's not how I imagine it. Like, this is a much more inviting version of it when the desk is to the side and the door just opens right up. And like, I was able to feel that and explore that in a way I couldn't see
yeah, I
from a
think you're
picture.
describing one of the actually really good application scenarios of this technology, and we are in fact ready already to use it in this way. So anybody who's thinking about remodeling or like even buying new furniture for their place or remodeling their kitchen or like thinking about whether 2 cars will fit in the garage. Uh, so we actually have relatively good precision now and relatively accurate previews. So scale still feels a little off because ultimately
Yeah,
it's faked. It's in the
sure.
headset is always here. It renders things just right in front of you, but it does so at a very in a very convincing way. So I think
Yeah.
the applications that you just described, yeah, I can see that if you have a meeting revolve around different design decisions, future like future designs and architectural designs, I think is that's where it's very promising. Do we need the metaverse for that? No. Do I
Right.
do I want to go to a bookstore? Yes.
Right.
So do I want to go to a
Well,
bookstore in virtual reality? No.
pull the book out, read it. You don't want to read, you don't want to type or read a bunch of text in VR right now. The
That's still a
resolution is
little
not great.
tricky.
Well, I would say, as people companies are learning, people are learning, you can work from anywhere in the world these days. I think that's one of the big learnings from this pandemic, right? That many people can work from anywhere.
Yeah.
Not everyone. Companies are leaning into that.
Mhm.
So, I mean, Accenture just bought 60,000 Oculus Quests or Meta Quests, and they're going to use it for onboarding all new hires and training.
That's
So I
the
think,
thing that I have in the back there, this white
yeah,
thing. 60,000 of them. Okay.
60,000. I mean, they've got employees all over the globe, right? So
I can't even
as
buy
you,
more than two for
well,
my
probably
courses.
because they bought them all,
Okay, yeah, maybe.
and the supply chain right now. So, I mean, I think you're starting to see if companies are providing them to employees, you're starting to do certain work. I don't know, from a remote workforce, like that meeting we did last week where we looked at design. One of the student designers was in North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of us were around Ann Arbor in different places, but we all met
Mm-hmm.
up in this virtual space. So I think there's use cases. It's just like, what's that sustained use, or what's that thing that brings you back? I mean, we think about that a lot for the educational content. Like, okay, we got 1 or 2 classes where there's an experience, but like, how do we access more content, or how do we create more content faster? What's going to keep
Right.
bringing you back
And it needs
versus
people who are already committed in order to empower others to actually experience it. Because I mean, buying 60,000 headsets, cool. Okay, so then, so do you send them to all your employees and like then they unbox and then they know what to do and how do you instruct them? We've actually done remote user studies with actually both of my PhD students, Audrey and Shweta, who I just wanted to mention here. Really cool students, fun to work with.
Oh yeah, they're
So we
great.
did pandemic onset. We moved some of our user studies to remote. So Shweta was actually driving some of the HoloLens to some of our participants, and obviously they're very excited. Cool, I get this package of equipment, so put it on. But then all the instruction and how to do this actually happened remotely. And in fact, the other user study where we worked with you was with Audrey. We had like pairs of people collaborate in virtual reality with his headset there in the background. And I must say, Audrey did an excellent job. She was super patient with instructing people. Many of them were like novices, and I was like, oh. but it's obviously not their fault. Like they use it for the first time. So imagine 60,000 employees get this Quest headset. Like, how do you actually instruct them? And do you actually teach them like, okay, so by the way, you now have cameras on your hand, so maybe be careful where you use them. Also, I'm your employer.
Right.
I find it, I mean, it's very cool that you see this kind of commitment, but maybe not fully thought through unless there is like really like, they have to, I mean, I'm sure they thought this through, but they have to provide, it's not enough to buy the headsets. They have to provide the onboarding, the support, to maybe help service, so things so that those are tricky. And then the content itself, like, but I think they have some good plans there, right? So they use it for specific training scenarios, maybe create their own experiences. So for me, from my perspective, it's exciting to see these movements and these kinds of commitments. It is sad that I, as an instructor, struggle to get 50 headsets to my students and have to work and partner up with you and everybody across campus. I mean, we are one of the leading institutions in the XR space, but we struggle to supply equipment to our students. And then my online courses, where we were very careful in how to design them so that everybody who doesn't actually have access to a headset can still participate and learn something. But it's like this lowest common denominator approach. If I could assume that everybody has a VR headset and an AR device like a HoloLens, I would design these courses completely differently. I wouldn't use a defensive design strategy. I would really design, and let's go and explore and really just do it. Right now it's like I have to design for like, okay, what if students don't have access?
More inclusive.
And then and on the inclusive side, and we actually had an accessibility question from some of our students, and I actually know some of the student names here, people that actually helped me make the courses more accessible, but I'm actually still not good at accessibility. So creating completely auditory experiences. So the question here that I am looking at is actually really interesting. As a blind creator, which I think we really want more people that really understand the challenges better. As a blind creator, is there a way to create a purely auditory 3D spatial virtual experience? And so, I mean, I know how 3D spatial audio works in theory. I know some of the research here. Anil Chamshi on campus, he's like, my opinion is like one of our audio experts. So I know it's possible, but can I give you a tool that was actually tested with blind users and that is accessible to blind users so that they can create that experience? I am not sure what I would recommend. So I would have to say, I really don't know. And I think it would actually be really good if you could do it. If I were to design such a tool, I would probably go for immersive authoring. So I would assume the person actually is going to be in AR or VR. They know if they might be designing for an environment that they're familiar with, so they can actually walk it. In fact, I think as a UX designer, one of the issues we often do is we assume that people with visual impairments have limited abilities. So I mean, technically, maybe they have limited vision, but they're highly capable, highly functioning people. So a lot of the assumptions that people make, they don't really understand this population, are actually really, really terrible. So I think it would be great if we could have more tools designed with and for people who really could benefit from more accessible solutions. In audio, haptics are actually some of the channels we would then really want to engage and use. And interestingly, we have almost zero design guidelines. Design guidelines are only for visual, if at all. And so I think it's one of the key areas. Anyway, as you know, and as you realize, I can talk forever about some of the specific issues. Back to you, Jeremy. Which one do you want to pick?
That just reminded, there was a new show on Apple TV Plus that was just about spatial audio. It was like storytelling with spatial audio. It was an interesting piece of content created. I can't remember the name of it right now, but yeah, that's.
Well,
I mean, there's a couple things you brought up.
Yeah, sorry.
So there's a group called XR Access. We'll drop the link in the chat here. This is a group that's spending a lot of time thinking about accessibility, design principles, how to design and develop for different, accessible area, disabilities or areas that folks, need to think about. And so there's a XR Access as a group. They just released a whole set of tools on GitHub for folks to access and incorporate into their projects and think about. And I want to return quickly. I know we only have a few minutes left, back to the part where you said about, we're struggling to get devices. I mean, we are, but there's also other impeding factors, right? Like Facebook, Meta, that presents a large challenge for an institution like ours, where we need to protect student data. And we need to have a data protection agreement with any vendor that we engage with on scale, right?
Agreed.
So we could go buy 500 Oculus Quests, but then we have this whole other problem to deal with of how do we protect the student data and how do we protect these experiences and make it safe.
You would wish there is more cooperation on the side of the vendors. And I mean, I think Facebook is now going to maybe, or Meta is the new company governing Facebook. Or like, I mean, it's like the same previous company, just a new name. Maybe going back on this decision that you are required to log in with your Facebook account if you're using a VR headset. So I think that addresses one of the issues. We still don't know exactly like where the data is stored and how the data can be protected according to the laws that we at the University of Michigan have to abide by. So yeah, I still think there are a lot of these. So on the privacy security side, which I think is another big area, and maybe coming back to your first question, I think in the space of privacy and security, I've learned a lot more over the last year that I just didn't know when I was teaching. I was very excited about ethics and privacy and security. I've run a few workshops. I've met a lot of cool people in this space. So I think privacy and security is also an area where I would like to do another lecture, and that would then include ethical and responsible design, and maybe also incorporating, like thinking through the issues with Facebook that you just mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, there's a group called the XR Safety Initiative, a nonprofit that's spending a lot of time and effort thinking about these challenges, creating a framework, thinking about biometrically inferred data, like what can they determine from you based on the way your eyes blink and where they move and where your head's positioned. You can infer a lot about somebody and identifying who they are. So
yeah, and some of the comments here, like ads and ad placement and all this, like when is it safe to interrupt users is an issue, and do they want to see this ad? And Facebook is starting to place ads in VR. Yeah, so I think there are lots of issues there. I know we are at the end-ish. I wanted to just maybe one thing, I think one question that wasn't answered, like what does the specialization actually prepare people for? So again, in terms of jobs, I think many learners have written to me and they told me, so I've previously been working in a more UX role in my company, and your AR VR course was really the thing I needed to step up my game and be like an XR person in that space. I always like these individual learner stories and a lot of very positive interactions through LinkedIn. If you have a computer science background, I think I would teach it slightly differently. I'm not sure that the content is really catered towards the most technical people, and this is where I think the most disappointment happens. But the other problem is when you look at the jobs that are available right now in the AR VR space, you won't find too many focused on, I mean, you'll find more now focused on user experience design, prototyping, but a lot of them are really deeply down technical, computer vision, computer graphics, rendering, hardware design. And so it's really a very complex space where there's a lot of jobs that the specialization doesn't actually prepare you for. And maybe that could be things we can work on in the future.
Yeah, and I think as companies dig into this deeper, they're going to see the need for designers and other support around, that aren't just developers. And so I think we're trying to advocate for that with many of the folks that we talk with, the companies. Yeah, just any final takeaways you have from?
Well, I have enjoyed meeting the learners online. I was looking forward to an event to actually really meet them. I think this as one of those events. That's what I think of this. But I also would really like to have like office hours or something like that.
Yeah.
I like it when people write to me and tell me, hey, you made a mistake here, Michael, or this is not up to date anymore. I like it when people say that they think I'm approachable and that they would like to help me. Some of the learners that were connected here, some of our attendees actually pointed out accessibility challenges they have in the course. And I regret I still have not been able to address all of them because fundamentally some of the tools are not accessible, and that's out of my control, like Unity and Unreal, although they're also working on that. So I just wanted to also take this opportunity to learn, to thank all the learners. I also think some of the feedback was, your videos are very long, Michael. So as you could tell, I like to talk a lot. So maybe I can improve that part of my teaching in the future. So thanks for all the feedback and encouragement from the learners. I just wanted to say thank you. It was it's not even a year, but there have been about 10,000 people that have at least looked at it, and more than 30 that wrote to me. I think of them as my students. So thanks, everybody.
Great. Yeah, no, this was fantastic. I always enjoy our conversations. I mean, we could talk for hours. Maybe next time we can schedule one of these in the metaverse, and we can try it to see if folks are interested in one of these platforms. We can look for that early next year. Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Michael. This was fantastic. Thanks for all the great questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of those in time. If folks, the one about the university, I'm happy to answer that separately if you want to email me. But just a few things. We've got an upcoming event, December 3rd, Social and Emotional Intelligence, featuring Jeffrey Sanchez Burks and Sherry Alexander from 11 to 12 Eastern. And you can follow us on any of the social channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Michigan Online. And then you can check out our relevant Michigan Online learning experiences. So I will put a link in the chat here, the intro to these XR for Everybody course series, the intro to AR, VR, the user experience, interaction design, and developing AR, VR, XR apps with WebEx and XR and Unity and Unreal. So you can learn more at online.umich.edu. And thank you so much.